Satyanarayan Stories, Chapter 1. Whenever we reflect upon the good ideals relevant to humankind, we remember the holy place called Naimisharanya. On the bank of the river Gomati Ji, at the beautiful ashram of Gurudev Sri Suji Maharaj, who personifies wisdom in the shade of the river tree of knowledge. Gurudev usually recited Kathamrit to the rishis who were gathered there. Through the medium of Katha and remembrance of the Lord, the rishis stayed connected to the God's divine glories. Katha is a way of remembering God. One day, the rishis asked Sri Suji Maharaj, Gurudev, kindly give us a rendition of Sri Satyanarayan Katha. ऐसी पावन कथा सुनाओ, प्रभु प्रेम का भाव जगाओ, ज्ञान की गंगा में नहलाओ, भक्ति रस का पान कराओ. Sri Suji replied, O Rishis, once a similar question was posed by divine Maharshi Narada to Bhagwanji. The Rishis said, Gurudev, we are very interested and curious about the conversation between Bhagwanji and Maharshi Narada. We would like to listen to your discourse on this story. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, it happened that one time, knowing the greatness of the earth, Devarshi Naradji once came to this planet and he visited all the holy places of pilgrimage, experiencing bliss within himself. He experienced inner serenity when he visited every holy place on the earth, and he was very pleased with the sacred, simple, and pure bearings of good people. मन ही मन प्रसन्न हुए, देवर्षि धन्य हुए, सब तीर्थन का दर्शन कीना, धन्यता का अनुभव लीना. हरिद्वार पुण्य दर्शन पाए, फिर गंगा में डुबकी लगाए, रामेश्वर में परम सुख पाया, प्रयागराज संगम नहाया. कितनी पावन धरती है ये, परम पिता की सृष्टि है ये. देवर्षि नारद जी wisely and fruitfully spent a long time in the association of devotees. Then, after some time, he found many people who were selfish and wanting to dominate over others. Selfishness is the cause of very many complications. When Devarshi Naradji saw people living in such circumstances, he was filled with compassion and mercy. He thought that even after obtaining human birth on the unique earth, if people are caught in worldly ambition, it is a regrettable situation. He wondered what solution to this situation would bring back the realization of the sanctity and power to this earth. He thought of approaching Bhagwanji, the creator of this universe. And with his mystical power, he reached Vaikuntha and prayed Bhagwanji to prescribe a remedy to elevate human beings. जय सुख कंद संत हितकारी, जय जगबंध भूमि भयहारी, जय जय असुर समूह निकंदन, जय जय भक्तन केयूर चंदन, जय 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 प्रणतारण मोचन, दैत्य दलन सुर सोच विमोचन. करियो प्रभु से वेग उपाई, हरिये विषम भूमि गुरु आई. When Bhagwanji listened to the emotional plea from Maharshi Narada, he explained to him, Naradji, this life becomes most joyous for those who perform every deed with care, consideration, and intelligence. Humans have to look after the welfare of themselves and this world through noble and virtuous action. If one performs all his deeds with sincerity and faith, this world will be filled with happiness. Everybody must discard their narrow perceptions and concentrate on the principles of action through devotion. Then he will be released from the bondage of his actions and will enjoy a happy state of mind throughout his life. कर्म क्षेत्र में पुण्य करे जो, सुख और वैभव प्राप्त करे वो. करनहार अस कर्म सुजाना, मुनिजन में ही जोगी मति माना. जिनके सब आरंभ पुनीता, बिनु संकल्प कामना रीता. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, Naradji conveyed this majestic message to everyone. When a person elevates his mind through noble ideals and holy pledges, puts complete faith in nobility, recognizes the difference between good and negative action, performs every deed with noble realization, and attains utmost devotion, such person would enjoy the grace of Bhagwanji throughout his life. श्री स्कंदपुराणे रेवाखण्डे श्री सत्यनारायण व्रत कथायां प्रथमो विश्रामः. Chapter 2. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, I will narrate the story of a devotee Shatananji, whose affection compelled Bhagwanji to appear once in this world. The Supreme Lord has appeared many times on this earth, but once he appeared out of his grace and mercy for Shatananji. This is a venerated saga. Long time ago, in the beautiful city of Kashi, there was a pious Brahman named Shatananji. He lived an honest and virtuous life. Some actions in his past life must have caused negative reactions, as he was in utter poverty in this life. But in the present life, he continued to perform noble and virtuous actions and never gave up his faith. Looking at this great character, his devotion and dedication to Bhagwanji and virtuous feelings towards others, Mateshwari Lakshmiji wondered why this devotee had to go through such a time in his life. Compassionate Lakshmiji asked Bhagwanji, Swami, why an elevated person like Shatanand going through such a time instead of being blessed? Bhagwanji said, Lakshmiji, with your blessings, he will lead a good life. Lakshmiji said, Swami, he is not able to receive my blessings. Kindly do something to reform his destiny so that he can receive my blessings. Impressed by the right conduct and the inner holiness of Shatanand, Bhaktavatsala Bhagwanji took the form of an old Brahmin and appeared at the house of Shatanand. As a Leela, Bhagwanji asked Shatanand, Shatanandji, why are you spending your life in poverty in spite of knowing everything? Bhagwanji asks an innocent question, precisely to enact his Leela. प्रभु ने ऐसा खेल रचाया बुद्धि विप्र का रूप धराया विप्र रूप बनकर प्रभु ने अपने भक्त का मान बढ़ाया. When Lord appeared for Shatanandji in the guise of Brahmana, Shatanandji heard a divine and soothing words of illustrious sage. He felt a great peace in his mind. O Rishis, Bhagwanji is Ananda Sindhu. He is Ananda Dham. Imagine how much love might have been showered when Bhagwanji appeared. It is very difficult to explain the joy in words. Seeing the Lord's compassionate grace, every part of the nature was in bliss. उस समय को कौन बताए जिस समय करुणा निधि आए दिव्य भाव की होने लगी वर्षा मानो प्रकृति का मन हर्षा. The story goes that by listening to these words, Shatanand was filled with joy and said, O Brahmin Devta, I am blessed with your darshan. The bliss I am experiencing today, I never had in my life. I do not know the reason for my poverty, but I am convinced that this is the consequence of my deeds. I know that Karmagati is very profound. It is easy to perform deeds, but difficult to face their consequences. O Rishis, a person is called a devotee who performs his duties with utmost sagacity, commitment, and sincerity. A devotee performs his duty with humbleness and dedication. When he succeeds in his work, he credits it to his grace. If sometimes they are unsuccessful, they do not blame anyone, but realize their own mistakes for the failure. But again continue to perform deeds with noble thoughts. For such devotees, Bhagwanji is very compassionate. He assumes many forms just out of affection for his devotees. Today he appeared as an old Brahmin for Shatanandji and made his destiny beautiful. That is why Bhagwanji is Bhaktavatsal. He gave Shatanand a divine appearance to change his fortune. But Shatanand did not recognize Bhagwanji and simply thought he was a Brahmin. Even if Shatanand could not recognize Bhagwanji, he did get the blessings just by the appearance. By darshan, all the effects of his karma in his previous lives were transformed into a beautiful blessed destiny. सब बिगड़ी दशा बनी उनकी, पूरे सब काज हुए। अब तक थे वे शतानंद, अब शतानंद महाराज हुए। भगवान भक्त को दुखी देख आप भी महादुख पाते हैं। आतुर होकर सदा भक्तों का वे बेड़ा पार लगाते हैं। With pleasing behavior, generous disposition, and noble deeds, every step of the life would be gifted. A person's thoughts should be as of Shatanand's. A person's purity should be as of Shatanand's. A person's devotion should be as of Shatanand's. These are the qualities that made Bhagwanji himself appeared in this world. The visit was merely God's Leela, which made Shatanand to perform the puja, which is popularly known as Satyanarayan Puja. The puja performed then was for the sake of Lord's faithful devotee, and it turned out to be a blessing for the whole world. From that time on, the concept of puja was started by devotees to obtain peace and happiness in life. This precept enlightens us that our past deeds dictate our fate. Only devotion and compliance like that of Shatanand can change our life for the better. One can only imagine the intensity of the submissiveness that made Goddess Lakshmi ji ponder about his plight. Knowing this story of Bhagwan's mercy and Shatanand's blessed good fortune in having God's vision, devotees obtain great happiness and eternal elevation. श्री स्कंदपुराणे रेवाखंडे श्री सत्यनारायण व्रत कथायां द्वितीयो विश्रामः. Chapter 3. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, now how can someone describe the divine and blissful life of Shatanandji? Wisdom and devotion, opulence and joy, all were showered on him at once. Whenever Shatanandji had a chance, he would be engrossed in singing the glories of Lord and would have satsang association with devotees at all times. On one afternoon of a summer day, Shatanand was performing puja along with other devotees. He was remembering the name of Bhagwanji. लेकर साक संबंधी एक दिन शतानंद ने कथा करी, प्रेम सहित पूजन करता था जपता मुँह से हरि हरि। जंगल से एक लकड़हारा लकड़ियाँ लेकर आया, देख के भीड़ वहाँ पर बैठी मन में सोच बड़ा आया. A woodcutter with stack of wood on his head was passing by Shatanand's house. He heard the divine God's name and felt peaceful vibrations in his mind. He stopped by Shatanand's home and observed the puja. The place where we pray with devotion and sincere faith, that place becomes sacred and bestows joy and peace on us. A woodcutter experienced a new kind of joy. After the prayers, everybody received charnamrit and prasad. The woodcutter's eyes were filled with tears and he politely asked Shatanand, Shatanandji, what is happening at your house? I am feeling a great joy in my heart. Shatanandji was very happy to hear the innocent question from the woodcutter and he started describing the greatness of Bhagwanji with bhakti and affection. Dear friend, the purity of thoughts and exemplary deeds is the other name of his blessings. Remembering the Lord's with noble thoughts gives rise to sagacity in the mind, and every deed turns out to be a virtuous deed. Once nobility is attained, one would always spend his life happily. This is the only way of obtaining bliss. When the woodcutter heard this great story of wisdom, his heart awakened to devotion and faith. With a light and joyful heart, he set off to sell the wood. On his way, he was filled with the remembrance of day's satsang. The divine and sweet words of Shatanand were echoing in his mind. When we are in the midst of gaining knowledge, when we hear and absorb good things, when our mind and soul feel the joy of learning good things, that feeling of joy is satsang, that is, we are in the company of God. Sat or Satya is God, and when We are learning and gaining knowledge and feeling utmost joy in it. Then we are in the presence and company of God. Satsang purifies our heart. Only a pure heart is bestowed with peace and joy. Suji Maharaj said, at the fair he got twice the usual price for his wood. This happens only when our heart is filled with noble ideals. Then all pure inner desires are fulfilled. We experience Lord's eternal blessings the moment we are pure, pleasing, and compassionate. Love of the affectionate God awakens in our heart. We are filled with highest knowledge and there is peace both within and externally. Just with this one awakening at the words of Shatananji, the woodcutter was bestowed with all the noble qualities. The story goes that his life was imbued with joy and happiness forever. श्री स्कंदपुराणे रेवाखंडे श्री सत्यनारायण व्रत कथाया तृतीयो विश्रामः. Chapter 4. Sri Suji said, O Rishis, now I will narrate the story of a king Chandrachud. He had all the opulences but did not have any offspring, and he and his wife were hoping to be blessed with children. They tried all the means to rectify their situation. They performed many yagyas and rituals but to no avail. Sadness continued in their life. They were unhappy and their life was unfulfilled. One day, the king went to a jungle in search of solitude. He sat down under a tree and deeply thought about God with sincerity. Sri Suji Maharaj says, when we remember God with true sentiments, we get a sense of proper inspiration within us. The divine grace will then accordingly help us. Sri Suji Maharaj says, to elevate the pious king, all of a sudden a Mahatmaji appeared in front of him. The Mahatmaji seemed to be very contented and had a remarkable glow on his face. The king bowed to the Mahatmaji and offered his respects. Mahatmaji asked the king, Rajan, what is the reason for his sadness? This valuable life is not for sadness. Leave aside his sadness, embrace happiness and joy. The king felt blessed by Mahatmaji's holy presence and narrated his life story. Mahatmaji listened to the story and comforted him, saying, God will relieve all your distress. He gave his blessing to the king and prayed to Bhagwanji to fulfill all his desires and gave him a sense of peace. With these words of Mahatmaji, the king returned home with great joy and happiness. On the advice of Mahatmaji, the king, along with his wife, went to the banks of river named Bhadrashila and started meditating. With the guidance of a holy person, whenever one gets blessed by God, he gets the power to do things that are humanly not possible. Soon after, the king was blessed with a child. His faith in God became more stronger. His life was full of happiness and joy. With the passage of time, on the eve of their child's birthday, the king, along with his wife, was worshipping at the same place where he had first offered prayers, at the bank of river Bhadrashila. The king seemed to be very happy. The whole atmosphere was very cheerful, and all the devotees were chanting the glory of Lord. A merchant, means Vyapari, was passing by in his boat, saw the king worshipping. He became curious, so he anchored his boat and participated in the puja. He joined other devotees in chanting Bhagwan's name. The Vyapari had never seen such an atmosphere in his life. He did not know anything about puja. After listening to, seeing, and experiencing such beautiful atmosphere, he felt differently. The king's great devotion towards God made the Vyapari realize the truth that he had no devotion until this moment. With only a short association of the devotees, he awakened to faith and devotion as well as wisdom. जो नहीं सोचा वो भी मिल जाए, पुण्यजनों के दर्शन पाए, पुण्यजनों के दर्शन करके पाते हैं हम सब सुख भर के. The pleased Vyapari reached home and narrated the whole event to his wife Lilavati. On that day, he had a remarkable glow on his face and seemed to be very happy. Lilavati was very pious. She felt very happy that her husband was showing signs of devotion. Sri Suji says, just those few moments of faith brought happiness into the Vyapari's life because he did not have a child, but in a short time his wife Lilavati gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Kalavati. With the passage of time, Kalavati grew up and a handsome young man from Kanchanpur was chosen as a right life partner for Kalavati. Their marriage was performed and they spent a happy life. Sri Suji Maharaj says, the story of Vyapari reveals the power of faith. The kind of faith we put in Bhagwanji decides the results we get. If we want our lives to remain free of negative thoughts, then we should inculcate pious thoughts, perform service for the good of humanity, and read Satya Grantha every day. The Vyapari's life had this lacking. He had the opportunity to do satsang only once in his life. That had given birth to faith. But because he did not find satsang again, disbelief started creeping into his life. Then his life became full of negatives. A negative life never gives us happiness. As long as the Vyapari had selfishness and arrogance, his life was full of struggles and complications. There was one incident when he and his son-in-law went to find business and were accused to be thieves. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, due to lack of faith, we only obtained failures in our life. The Vyapari's life was filled with struggle and complications. Their struggles continued for a long time. However, due to sincere bhakti of Lilavati and Kalavati, they were saved. Their luck finally turned better, and the king found that they were innocent and cleared them of all charges. To make amends for their troubles, the king gave them a lot of wealth and bade them farewell. On their way home, they had a great privilege to meet a very wise sage, Dandi Swamiji, who embodied divine knowledge. But even on this blessed occasion, they resorted to deception and lies because their hearts were not pure. Sri Suji Maharaj says, O Rishis, when the businessman met a great sant, then he started to think that the sant might come to know about his enormous wealth. He might ask for money from me. To avoid such a situation from happening in a split second, he started to think that he'll say that his boat has only leaves, only latapatra. Suji Maharaj said the businessman started to have such low thoughts. When his thought of telling sons that he had only leaves in his boat, he developed an apprehension and fear. He began to feel that by thinking so it might turn into reality. Just by this thought, he started to have a feeling that his boat has only leaves now. Money in his boat might transform to leaves. He started to feel that his fear might turn out to be true. Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, a mind that is filled with selfishness and ignorance always displays doubt and fear. It gives helpless feelings in one's life. It leads to inferior thinking. Weak hearted people are always in anxiety because of their poor sense of judgment. They have doubts in every task they perform. Ignorance is that one darkness which bothers us in tough times and develops prejudice in good times. Swamiji was very enlightened. He understood that the Vyapari's lack of wisdom is making him think in that manner. Such persons had not fully overcome negative tendencies. Therefore, they are in such a situation. So, So the Guruji, out of his mercy, imparted deep wisdom and bestowed blessing to elevate them. With the satsang and blessings from Swamiji, grace was showered, that the merchant's heart was awakened to wisdom and true joy. Vyapari's life was filled with pity and his life became meaningful and full of happiness. निराधार शंका के कारण दूषित हो जाता है तन मन। सत्संग से विश्वास जगाओ, मानव जीवन सफल बनाओ। संत समाज तीर्थ राजा, पूर्ण करते सबके काजा। Who can obtain the grace of Lord? One who has a kind heart. How can our mind become kind? By doing satsang and making an effort to do good deeds. One who has a good heart, one who always has noble feelings, their every effort would become puja. A true puja is a noble deed. To make a puja successful, it is very much essential to do good deeds. Shri Suji Maharaj says, O Rishis, only those people are happy who lead a life of wisdom, simplicity, and satisfaction. Satvikta, Jnana, and Bhakti form the essence of life. श्री स्कंदपुराणे रेवाखंडे श्री सत्यनारायण व्रत कथायां चतुर्थ विश्राम. Chapter 5. Sri Suji Maharaj said, O Rishis, always remember that only by God's grace we got this human life. So everywhere and every moment we should be involved in bhakti and exchange of happiness. Let there not be arrogance and pride in one's life. For even if one has everything, it becomes meaningless if one is proud. Pride corrupts the mind of a person and leads to his downfall. It is the cause of anger and other negative tendencies. In fact, it is ultimately the source of unhappiness. I will narrate the story of Raja Mandar to illustrate this. The Raja was deeply involved in the welfare of his people. He was very capable and knowledgeable man and was considered a scholar of Vedas and Upanishads. During his rule, religious events were celebrated frequently. People were very happy in his rule, but a small trace of false pride in his character tarnished all his good qualities. The good qualities of that Raja were eclipsed by his false pride. He would daily recite hymns and verses, but never experienced their true deep meaning, nor practice the precepts. He would daily perform worships, but never purified his actions. He would try to meditate, but never understood the true meaning of humanity, because he did not comprehend the true value and depth of tradition. He just became arrogant with superficial air of false wisdom. Question: when does a prayer reach its intended culmination? When our behavior reflects the noble ideals and our life succeeds in all pure endeavors. That is when our prayer realizes fruitful culmination. We can lock ourselves and pray to God, but can give a meaningful and successful outcome to our prayers only if we complement our prayers with good actions. O Rishis, unfounded pride enters one's life unknowingly. Later on, it grows enormously and completely overshadows everything in life. So, one should be watchful and shield themselves against false pride. One day, the Raja went to a jungle on a summer day. It was a hot afternoon, and he was lost in the jungle. He was very thirsty and started wandering in the jungle in search of water. He reached a banyan tree under which few devotees were doing bhajans in worship of Lord. With deep voices and moist eyes, the devotees were deeply immersed in prayers. After offering their prayers, the devotees noticed the presence of the Raja. They felt very happy. They offered him charnamrit and prasad and politely said, Rajan, today we performed puja. We are happy that you are here. Please join us and accept the prasad." The Raja, shadowed by his false pride, insulted them and refused the prasad. The king displayed his inhuman attitude and uncouth behavior toward the innocent devotees, and this was contrary to the norms and laws of nature. Sri Suji said, "Whenever we engage ourselves in evil behavior and criticize innocent people, we destroy all our good deeds." The Raja had to undergo hardships because of his improper behavior with devotees. He reflected, "I had such a happy and comfortable life until now. How did it degrade into such a misery?" Being intelligent, he soon realized that his harsh and arrogant behavior with good and innocent folk was the cause of his downfall. He realized his mistakes very soon and went back to the jungle, having rid himself of his ego and pride. He sought forgiveness from the devotees and offered sincere prayers to the Lord. Soon after, the king was blessed with a happy and joyful life because he regained faith in noble ideals. We should not hurt anybody's feelings if we want ourselves to be graced by God's blessing. When we conduct ourselves with compassion and affection to good souls, we obtain the blessings of God. By showering kindness and gentle sweetness to our fellow beings, we shall be showered by His grace at all times. Any feelings beginning with conceit are cause of trouble. O Rishis, by filling our hearts with pure feelings and pure thoughts, we must endow our lives with wisdom and simplicity. This yoga is very beneficial. Our sages have said that it is unique since one obtains bhakti very naturally in this age, just by good thoughts and actions, which was impossible in earlier epochs. That which could be achieved by great efforts and austerities in earlier ages is easily accomplished in this age by mere remembrance of His names. जिसके मन में दया भावना सच्ची है यह उनकी आराधना, आत्मवत जो व्यवहार बनाए भव से बेड़ा पार लगाए। मानवता ही प्रभु धर्म है, हरि भक्ति का पहला कर्म है। मधुर व्यवहार जो करेगा हरि कृपा से झोली भरेगा। प्रसन्न रहकर खुशियाँ बांटो, हर पल खुशी के फूल तुम छाटो। Whenever we remember Him in true sentiments and with good deeds, our life is filled with happiness forever. After listening to the narration of Satyanarayan Puja by Sri Suji Maharaj, the rishis showered their respects to Gurudev and returned to their ashrams. Shri Skanda Purane Revakhande Shri Satyanarayan Vrat Kathayam Panchamo Vishrama.